town. What a stupid thing to think. I hear you biting off a breakdown. I myself am on the brink. I used to want to be a real man. I don't know what that even means. Now I just want you in my arms again, and we can search each other's dreams. I know you're tired and you ain't sleeping well. Uninspired, likely man as hell. But wherever you are, I hope the high road leads you home again. I've heard enough of the white man's blues. I've sang enough about myself. So if you're looking for some bad news, you can find it somewhere else. Last year was a son of a bitch for nearly everyone we know. But I ain't fighting with you down in the ditch. I'll meet you up here on the road. I know you're tired and you ain't sleeping well. Uninspired, likely man as hell. But wherever you are, I hope the high road leads you home again, in the world you want to live in. We'll ride the ship down, dumping buckets overboard. There can't be more of them than us. There can't be more. I know you're tired, you ain't sleeping well. Uninspired, likely man as hell. But wherever you are, I hope the high road leads you home again, to the world you want to live in. To the world you want to live in.
Good morning. Good morning. It is my pleasure to officially welcome you to the 2025 NHLA Annual Convention and Exhibit Showcase. Now please rise and remain standing for the U.S. and Canadian national anthems. I do not want to sing it. Oh, Canada, native land, true patriot Do it again. Oh, say, can you see our dawns early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare was bursting in air. They proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you. You may be seated. Several of our friends and leaders in the hardwood industry have passed away since our convention in St. Louis, Missouri. Paul Bibu, Joe Lyle, Jeff Taylor, Rich Thompson, Gus Welter, Eugene M. Wingert, Robert Carroll Wren, Jim Yates. If anyone would like to recognize an individual who is no longer with us, please raise your hand and share their name. We will ensure their memory is honored in our official records. Now please join me in a moment of silence for their memory. Thank you. It is truly a blessing to welcome you all to San Antonio and as chairman of the National Hardwood Lumber Association. When I accepted this role, I believed in my years on the board, my understanding of our association's foundation, the grading rules, my experience working with our talented staff, and my deep love for this industry had prepared me to lead. I had watched and learned from many great presidents and chairmen before me and thought I knew what to expect. I knew the role would challenge me, but I didn't expect the hardest part to be this moment, facing you from this stage. As someone who has never felt comfortable with public speaking, I've dreaded this day from the moment I accepted the nomination. I say have dreaded in the past tense, because 8 weeks ago something happened that changed everything. While attending the Missouri Forest Products Association summer meeting in Branson, Missouri, I went to lunch with my wife between meetings. Out of nowhere, I was overwhelmed by an incredible headache. Things went downhill very quickly, and within minutes, my wife had called for an ambulance, and I was being hauled out of the restaurant on a gurney. I have no memory about what happened over the next several hours, but the next thing I do remember is being taken to the intensive care center in Springfield, which was about 45 minutes from Branson. I had suffered a type of stroke known as a brain bleed. Fortunately for me, my wife acted fast. The first hospital with the ambulance was less than 1 mile from the restaurant. They had doctors at the hospital who quickly diagnosed the brain bleed. They immediately sent me to the larger hospital in Springfield, which was best equipped to treat me. While I laid in the ICU for a very long 7 days, my wife told me how lucky I really was. The doctors told her that most people that experience a brain bleed never even make it to the hospital, and only half of those that do survive. I am happy to report I have no lasting complications because of the stroke, but the doctors are still working to pinpoint the cause so that we can put a prevention plan in place. For a person who has been healthy his whole life, it has been easy to look to the future. Someday I'll do this, or someday I'll do that. But when I experienced my health scare, I began to change my perception on my life. Tomorrow really isn't guaranteed to anyone. As my life returned to normal, I began worrying about this speech again. I started writing down a few things on a Saturday, but nothing felt worthy. The next day I went to church, and the sermon was about our time on earth just being a blip in time. They asked, if what you are spending your time on is what you are spending your time on important? This question really resonated with me. If tomorrow never came, did I accomplish anything that made a difference? When I answered that question, I knew what I had to do. I never wanted to take on the role of chairman with a personal agenda. This is not a bully pulpit where I can force my will onto an industry, but I also don't want to wait for a tomorrow that may never come to have this conversation. So today, I stand here facing my fear of public speaking because this conversation is too important to put off any longer. In last month's Hardwood Matters, my Elephant in the Room article only scratched the surface. Today, I want to speak plainly about an issue that affects every one of us, our industry's approach to log exports. This is not about pointing fingers or taking sides. It's about asking hard questions that will shape the future of our businesses, our mills, and our livelihoods. Whether you support log exports or have deep concerns about their long-term impact, this discussion matters, and we need to have it together in the open. I understand the simple economics of selling a log. If you pay $100 for a log and you can sell it overseas for $150, you make a solid profit, and you get paid quickly. If you take that same $100 log and saw it into lumber, you have to factor in labor and equipment and operating costs, and then wait weeks to get paid. If you run a kiln operation, you add months of drying time and additional expense, hoping there's still profit left when the lumber finally sells. When the raw log is worth more than the lumber it produces, it seems to make short-term financial sense to sell the log. But what does that decision do to our long-term ability to sell lumber into those markets? Are today's quick profits building tomorrow's disaster, a future where many North American sawmills no longer exist? I fear that it's exactly what has happened. In fact, I believe it already has to a considerable degree. The largest foreign consumers of North American hardwood logs are China and Vietnam. In my conversations with lumber distributor customers in these countries, nearly all tell us that their domestic production is taking over the market for hardwood lumber from our exported logs. Many fear that their businesses are in danger. They keep asking, why are so many mills selling logs? Don't they understand they're destroying their future lumber markets? Why doesn't your country stop this? And I have to be honest, I struggle to answer them. And I don't claim to have all the solutions, but I do know this: if the very people buying our logs are warning us that this path threatens our shared future, then we owe it to ourselves and to them to take a hard look at what we're doing and where it leads. The other question we all ask is this: why are foreign buyers able to pay so much for our logs? At last fall's Board of Directors meeting, the Market Impacts Committee created a special log task force to dig into that very question. And before anyone gets nervous, let me be clear, it is the Log Export Task Force, not the Stop Exporting Logs Task Force. Over the past year, this group has worked hard to uncover answers. Is it simply lower labor costs and less regulation? Are there government subsidies at play? Or are they processing logs in a way that gives them a higher yield? Under the leadership of Tom Coble of Hartselle Hardwoods, the task force has gathered a wealth of data and even conducted extensive testing on the Chinese style of sawing. Tom will present their findings at this fall's board meeting, and the results will be shared with all members in an upcoming issue of Hardwood Matters. I remember Jeff Meyer standing up here saying, "You don't know what you don't know." It is a powerful truth. Today I will add my twist by saying, you only know what you do know, and I know walnut. Walnut only represents about 2% of the volume of North American hardwoods in our forests, but it represents 27% of the hardwood logs being exported and over 95% of my mill's production. Recent USDA data shows that there are more footage of walnut logs being exported than lumber. That should scare everybody in this room. Your species could be next. I know firsthand that this is a divisive topic, and no one wants somebody else taking food out of their family's mouths. At last year's American Walnut Manufacturers Association meeting, I asked to add log exports to the agenda. And let me tell you, if you ever want to pack a meeting room, just put log exports on the agenda. You'll have a full room and then some. When I suggested that the AWMA take a position on log exports, I believe there are only 2 of us sawmillers in the room who opposed the practice, myself and 1 other mill. Most of the other sawmills present were either making money exporting logs or didn't think it affected them. Now, 1 year later, that other mill that was on my side is now exporting most of their walnut logs too. So I guess I'm the last man standing, which either makes me very stubborn or very brave. I'll let you decide that. This is not just affecting me and walnut logs, it's affecting many other companies I've heard from over the past several years. There is no simple answer to this problem. America is a free country with personal property rights. We need to continue to have a free log trade policy with our closest neighbors in Canada, and we still need veneer log markets overseas. Still, we must find a way to protect our American sawmill industry. Everyone wants to get the most out of their products, but we just can't become a nation that exports its natural resources. I worry about my boys and the future of our company. I worry about every one of you in this room and the future of our association. The National Hardwood Lumber Association depends on a strong, thriving sawmill industry to sustain programs and services our members count on. We cannot afford to ignore this challenge. I urge all of us to keep this conversation going and work together to create a marketplace where every mill, every member, and every region has a fair chance to compete, not just today, but for generations to come. When I step off this stage, some of you may pat me on the back, and some of you may want to kick me in the pants, and that's okay. What matters most is in my short time on this earth, my family can say I used my voice and my time to make a difference. I can't finish without thanking John and Stephanie for covering for me while I've been recovering. As you guys know, your association is in such great hands with these 2 amazing leaders. And I want to thank my wife, Cindy, for her love and support throughout my medical scare. I don't think it's a coincidence that we began this morning by honoring friends we lost this past year. It's a powerful reminder that our time here is brief. So I'll conclude with the same question that moved me to give this speech. If tomorrow never came, can you say you spent today making a difference? Thank you.
Thank you, Bucky, for those inspiring words. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dallin, or Davy Crockett Brooks. I'm sorry, trying to remember who I am. If you didn't see me last night, you lost out. So just want to welcome you all to the NHLA. Really, we got to thank Bucky for his vision and his leadership, his dedication, and his sacrifice. It's a great example to all of us of a commitment to an industry for the betterment of the industry, and we all owe him another round of applause for his hard work. We also have to thank our sponsors. You know, the NHLA Convention is being able to be put on because companies around this room and in this exhibit hall and other areas continue to sponsor events and help make this possible for all of you to gather together. So we really do appreciate our sponsors who continually put forth extra money to help the NHLA and help all of us be able to gather together and have a great event, have great bacon for breakfast. Hard-earned money goes towards bacon. And have a great opportunity to learn more. We appreciate all of the different levels of sponsorships. Every little bit counts as we work together to build an industry and to get together so that we can have a wonderful time and enjoy it. If you didn't get a chance to see those Longhorns or get your picture with them last night, again, you missed out. But we hope you'll stick around, keep coming back. We look forward to having you here next year. We really appreciate all the different sponsors for the different events who take the time to make sure that they get recognized. Go around and say hi to them, visit the exhibitors, give them a chance to earn your business, or at least make a pitch to you that they have the ability to help you improve your business and everything else, and also to the sponsors for ITSEF. So can we have a round of applause for all the sponsors, please? Also, let's take a moment to thank the NHLA staff for doing everything except for the Canadian National Anthem and the American National Anthem. We really appreciate the hard work of NHLA staff. They're running around, they're doing a lot. Can I have the NHLA staff please stand up that are in the room? Can we give a round of applause to the NHLA staff? In these tough times, we keep asking them to do more for less and with less resources, and we appreciate their hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. Also on the board of directors, we have a number of leadership teams, both our chairman, our mission leaders, and our deputy mission leaders. If they're in the room, will they please stand? This is your executive committee and mission leaders dedicated taking time, extra time to deal with me and all the ideas and everything that they have, and we appreciate them. Can we give them a round of applause? And additionally, the current board members, will they please stand in the room? We appreciate their dedication and service to guiding the NHLA. Just speaking of board of directors, and Bucky mentioned things like the task force, board direction is just as important. And I can tell you this, and you need to know it from the bottom of my heart. Every day I think, what would the board have me do? And then I do something completely different. No, I'm just kidding. No, not really. Maybe. Think about that. No, we use the board direction to grow and stabilize the hardwood industry as our goal, and our committees and the setup that we have and the task force that they create give us the direction to say, hey, this is what's important to us each and every day as we go out there and represent the industry and work to improve things so that we can grow and stabilize the entire hardwood industry and grow the hardwood lumber markets. And so we do a lot of work. We have a strong commitment continually going forward to the Real American Hardwood Coalition. I know sometimes it feels like things have fallen off there, but we continue to work with our allied associations, and we appreciate their commitment to the RAHC as we continue to go out there. The NHLA has used our grants from the USDA to exhibit at a number of trade shows. We've built a new trade show booth that you'll get to see some pictures of here shortly. We're going out there. The RHC got grants this year themselves to do promotion to designers and architects, and a new era of the RHC is going forward that is a great commitment that we are going to continue to see. Of course, the NHLA is always committed to supporting our partners with AHEC and exports, and we'll continue to work with them. Dana and I travel and give presentations and work considerably with them. We just had a great AHEC board meeting yesterday where we continually aligned our administrative staff and financial grant writing things together, and we're looking forward to working with AHEC more, and we appreciate them. And of course, the Hardwood Federation. You know, we continue to support and work to help come up with solutions to our issues legislative-wise, and we appreciate Dana Cole and her work and the Hardwood Federation and our opportunities to go out there to introduce legislation to work with the industry. We're constantly trying to find ways to help things and appreciate that. And finally, the North American Forest Foundation and their commitment. So we appreciate all these other associations, allied associations, and hopefully we can continue to work together to make and grow and stabilize the hardwood industry. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to invite Ted Rossi of the Rossi Group, our longtime premier sponsor of the NHLA Convention, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Davey. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here, and I think it's about the 8th convention that we've been fortunate to sponsor as Rossi Group. And it's a very special time for us because this year is, you know, as you all know, I hope you all know, this is our 100th anniversary, and it kind of didn't hit me until I was here and talking to everyone, and everyone was congratulating myself and my team on how special a day this was, you know, 100 years, and trying to look back on it and, you know, reflect on our history. It's really difficult. How do you condense 100 years, especially into 5 minutes? So I just want to give you kind of a little bit of what Rossi Group was, or Rossi family was, and how it got started, maybe in going by decades, if you will. But the company was founded by my father in 1925. and we were in the hardwood lumber business with one truck and portable mills, a portable mill. And through the first decade, through 20s and 30s, 2 decades, and through the Great Depression, my family, my father was in the hardwood lumber business doing industrial lumber, charcoal. Actually, we had charcoal kilns too. We didn't have lumber kilns at that time, there were charcoal kilns. And right through the 30s, mostly concentrating on industrial lumber. And through the World War II years and the rebuild afterwards, we expanded and more portable mills in the woods. We had 26 teams of horses at one time doing horse logging right up until the 60s. And we continued to do that well into the 50s. Had a little bit of a stint there for about 12 years where, as all good lumbermen do, we bought a couple of dairy farms and used those dairy farms as a base for our maintenance yard, and started a pallet operation, which we did out of one of the barns, which we kept for about 40 years using our industrial lumber that we had. In the 60s, we did a transition from portable mills and horse logging. In the 50s, we transitioned from, and we built our stationary mills in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and over a 10-year period, transitioned all our production out of those portable mills and into more mechanized logging, and also stationary mills. In the 70s, and that's when really I became more active in the business. My father passed away in '66. So my brother and I decided, and in the 70s, what we were going to do. And we did a very aggressive build on kiln operations and expanding our marketing and going from industrial production into, grade lumber and more downstream applications. So we constructed our kilns, and I decided at that time, very young in the business, obviously one thing I did have was a lot of energy, and we decided we saw an opportunity, and we thought in the early 70s that the export market was really going to be the place to be. And at that time, it was Europe. And I just got on a plane in the early 70s, mid 70s, started following Don Meyer around Europe, taking lumber orders. And at that time, a lot of green lumber was being produced. I mean, it was nothing to go on a trip into Europe in the mid 70s and come back with 200-300 containers of green red oak to be shipped over, a 2 or 3 month period. So it was boom times. Expanded into all the markets, many trips. Our idea was to build relationships worldwide through our lumber, which we had a 20-year plan to do, actually. And over that 20 years, we entered into 40 different markets. And by the 1990s, we're in the Far East, of course, during the 80s. And then in the 90s, we're one of the first to go into China and introduce our product into that arena. And by 2000, we were pretty proud of what we accomplished. We were recognized in 45 different countries as one of the premier brands, and continue to still be. And as a matter of fact, we had our 75th anniversary. We actually had it in Europe. It was in 2000, and we brought in 150 people from around the world and did our celebration in Brussels, because that's where our business was concentrated, in Europe. And boy, what a difference 25 years later. I mean, it's changed completely. The next 10 years, we entered into the Chinese market, as we all did here. We've watched that market grow, transition, and become a big part of what American hardwood products needs now. And that continues, and good and bad, that's where we are. I focused on the last 20 years, really. I decided we had reached the pinnacle where we're going to be with our brand and our marketing and our recognition in the world, and I decided to devote a lot of my time over the past 25 years to the industry, to the Hardwood Federation, very instrumental in setting up AHEC, the promotion efforts that we've made, and of course, my 20-year stint at NHLA and as president of NHLA. So that's really been the history of Rossi Group, and I didn't realize that to now, when we celebrate this 100th anniversary, that people were coming up to me and saying, we don't know of any other hardwood producing, and maybe there are some here, but I think other than one or two other companies, there's very few companies, if any, that have been producing hardwood lumber for 100 years, and we're pretty proud of that. We're proud of our place in the industry. We're certainly proud of American hardwoods, and most importantly, I'm just so proud and thankful for all the friends that really have become kind of part of my family, my lumber family. My wife asked me many times, so she's not here today, so I can say it, but how come you're not going to retire? How come you're not going to retire? And I don't know why I would retire. With so many friends and so much opportunity and so much that the industry needs, I feel that we still have a lot to give. And I certainly have looked forward to my company continuing and have a great sales staff and management staff that will continue in the future. Jesse Lasan, my nephew Scott, and by the way, Jesse, even though he has the same hairdo, I just want to make it clear, he's not my son, okay? So, but anyways, we're proud of where we are. We're very grateful to this industry. We're thankful that we're able to sponsor this convention. I look forward to many more years of hopefully sponsoring the convention, certainly communicating with our friends and helping this industry, helping it on promotion, helping it on expanding the opportunities for American hardwoods. And I really look forward to being part of this family. So thank you very much for your relationships, your support, and everything you've given me and my family. And I look forward to giving it back in the years ahead. And enjoy the convention. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. This morning's opening session and keynote speaker is sponsored by Baillie Group. As we welcome Jeff to the stage, can we give Baillie and him a round of applause?
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Dallin, and good morning to each of you. It's our honor and privilege this morning to sponsor the keynote address for this NHLA convention. Our keynote speaker is Taylor St. Germain of ITR Economics. Taylor and his colleagues at ITR advise organizations from small businesses and trade associations to Fortune 500 companies specializing in market and company level forecasting. Taylor is a key contributor to ITR's 94.7% forecast accuracy, so when he talks trends, people listen. Before joining ITR, Taylor worked in tech, providing market intelligence to electronics OEMs, semiconductor companies, and component manufacturers. Over the past 5 years, he's helped distributors, manufacturers, and producers navigate the business cycle and sharpen their strategic planning, including deep research in the industrial sector with a focus on oil and gas. Taylor holds a BA in statistics from the University of Vermont and is completing a master's in applied economics at Southern New Hampshire University. He's also been featured in OEM Magazine, Lawn and Landscape, and on the Fab Lab and Wealth Formula podcasts. Personally, I'm quite familiar with the ITR group. One of the ITR partners has consistently spoken at a business group named Vistage that I belong to, and they've consistently spoken at another industry convention that I attend. In all cases, their insight and advice has been spot on. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Taylor St. Germain.
Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing? It's important we start that way. My name's Taylor St. Germain with ITR Economics. Thanks so much for having me here. I know we are in challenging times, we're in uncertain times. My job's to cut through the noise today and share with you the path forward. I'll do that in a number of different ways today. First, I'm going to kick things off with just a quick update on our methodology and how we think about the economy. I hope you'll put this into practice in your business as well. From there, we'll jump into some comments on the global economy. We do forecast Canada's economy, wanted to share some comments there. Then we'll take a look at tariffs. We'll take a look at how tariffs are impacting the economy and how we're thinking about trade relationships changing as a result of these tariffs. Of course, I can't make it through a presentation without saying tariffs, so we'll kick things off with that here to begin with. After we discuss the global economy, we'll jump into inflation and interest rates. I'll give you our view on inflation for the next 3 years. Do we expect interest rate relief? How's this fun relationship between Chairman Powell and President Trump going to ultimately shape up? So a lot of good insight for you there. We'll talk labor, we'll talk the U.S. economy at large, and finally we'll finish off with the construction markets. We'll look at metrics that are specific to your industry and really give you our perspective on the path forward. Now, I'll share with you that we're very optimistic on the path forward, both for Canada and the U.S. Yes, there'll be challenges along the way as we navigate these next few years, but we're optimistic that 26, 27, and beyond are years that are going to be characterized by growth. So yes, I'm that economist that's going to tell you growth's coming. I'm sure you've heard that a lot over the past few years, but I promise the data will support that. I'll leave plenty of time at the end for any questions that you all might have. So without further ado, I did just want to jump in. There's a few things I wanted to start with here first. The very first thing I wanted to kick things off with, if you can get my clicker working here, there we go. The first thing I always kick things off with is our report card. Now, I share this at the beginning of every presentation. What you're looking at on the screen is the major series that we forecast. Then the middle column is the duration in terms of number of months that forecast has been in place without being revised to achieve the accuracy you see down the right-hand side. Folks, these are big macroeconomic data series. You should expect that level of accuracy from anyone that calls themselves a macroeconomic forecaster. Our competitive advantage is that middle column. We don't change forecasts every month, every quarter. We can leave these forecasts in place for a year plus and still achieve that high accuracy. That's really my goal today. I don't want to be a moving target for you all. I want you to be able to take the information that I'm sharing with you today, and I want you to be able to hold that in high regard a year from now. That's what's important to us. We don't want to be a moving target, and that's why that middle column is our competitive advantage. Now, before I jump into the fun, there's just one last piece of housekeeping I wanted to share with you all, and it's the way we think about the business cycle or the economic cycle. We break it down into 4 parts. We call it our 4 phases of the economic cycle. You can see A, B, C, and D. They're clearly color-coded for you here. As many of you know, we go through peaks, we go through valleys. The economy does, your business does. And it's very important that we identify where we are in the cycle and, of course, where we're going. The way we determine that is based on where your growth rate is in relationship to 0. So the first phase of the cycle is the recovery phase of the cycle. That's when your growth rate is still negative, but it's getting less negative. You see that momentum building. This is where much of the economy is today, which is, yes, there's some green shoots out there. There's some momentum building, but we're still below 0. You know, I met with an executive team last week, and their company just transitioned to recovery, and the sales team's all excited, and the CEO says, guys, that just means you suck less. And that's really what this phase of the cycle is about, right? You're still negative, but you're getting less negative. Now, as we move forward into 2026, we expect most of the economy to be in that accelerating growth phase of the cycle. That's the next phase. That's phase B for us. It's the best phase of the cycle to be in, right? That's when we're growing and there's more growth on the horizon. We expect the single-family housing market to be in accelerating growth next year. We expect our manufacturing industry here in the U.S. to be in accelerating growth. It's the best place to be. Now, once we cross through that peak, we move into what we call the slowing growth phase of the cycle. This is the most important phase for any economist to identify, because your business is still growing, but you're growing at a slower pace. And what often comes after that is a recession. The good news I have for you all today, we are not projecting a recession in the US economy for the next 5 years. We are preparing ourselves for what we see as 5 consecutive years of growth here in the United States. That's true mostly for Canada, but we'll chat about Canada here as well. So you'll see these colors throughout my presentation today. I urge you to look at your data in this same way. It lends a lot of power. All right, let's jump into the global economy here first. I wanted to kick things off with our overall benchmark of the global economy. I promise I'm going to keep charts simple for you all today. You're looking at 2 lines on the chart. The dark blue line is the global economy in terms of industrial output. So any country that produces anything is in that dark blue line. The red line that you see on the chart is our leading indicator. You'll see the red line extends further than the blue line. That's because it leads by 8 months. That's the G7. That's the 7 major developed countries around the world. The takeaway you need to have from this chart is notice that our global economy there in dark blue is not only growing above 0, it's accelerating in its pace of growth. The global economy has continued to expand. The last time we saw a global recession was right after the pandemic. You can see that there. But our leading indicator there in red suggests this growth continues. We get a lot of questions. Are you forecasting a global recession in 2026? No. In order for us to forecast a recession in 26, that red line would need to be pointing down below 0. It's not. And this is an example of how we use leading indicators to inform us in terms of the direction in which we're headed. So the first takeaway I want you to have here is we have the global economy continuing to accelerate. That's good news. This is the relationship between the US economy and the global economy. So the global economy is there in teal, the US economy is there in dark blue. When I talk about the economy, you might notice that I'm talking about industrial production. I'm not talking about GDP. There's a reason for that, because all of you here in this room produce something. Industrial production is a much better metric for your business than staring at something like GDP, which has government spending impacting it. So I talk about the economy in terms of industrial production. And what you'll notice about this chart is despite the global economy accelerating, in 2024, the US economy actually was going through a period of negativity. And not enough people talk about that. 2024 was tough. We were seeing an industrial and a manufacturing recession in our country in 2024. Nobody talks about that. But that's what that dark blue line being below 0 in 2024 really highlighted. But again, the good news is look at our forecasts. Our forecasts are those markers, those circles that you see extending out into the future, and we have nothing but growth above 0 for the next 12 quarters. So from an industrial standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint, we are preparing the clients that we work with for 12 consecutive quarters of growth. That's a welcome sight after the about 18 months we've had where we've seen our manufacturing and industrial economy here in the US contract. Now, we forecast a number of different regions around the world. I want you to see this dashboard here. This is showing you our expectations for a number of different countries or regions. I really want you to point your attention to the color-coded columns on the right. That's showing you, first, you can see this current 12-12 column. That's where the growth rate for that country or region is as we're sitting here talking today. Then you can see our expectations for 25, the end of this year, 26, and 27. There's a few things I want to unpack here. First, for all of our friends in the room from Canada, you might recognize my last name. My grandparents are from Montreal originally. They at some point in time came down into the US. Don't tell President Trump. We've got a big connection to all of our friends in Canada. I'm responsible for all of our Canadian clients. You can see there's a 0.9% growth rate for Canada's industrial economy expected by the end of this year. Before tariffs went in place, we were forecasting Canada's economy to grow at about 1.6%. The tariffs cut Canada's growth rate about in half. Nobody charged the stage, so that's good so far. Now, the reality of the situation is, since the beginning of 2025, there has been less exports from the US to Canada as a result of this, and less imports from Canada to the US. The only other country that's seen a trade trend that challenging is China. So Canada has really been challenged as a result of this trade relationship. Folks, I'm not here to care about your politics. It doesn't matter to me who you voted for. That is just what the data shows. Now again, for everyone from Canada, I'm not saying we're not going to see growth, and we are going to see the pace of growth pick up. It's just this trade relationship has clearly taken some of the wind out of the sails here. But again, what I want you to notice with this chart here is, regardless of what region you're looking at, as we move forward from the end of from where we are today into the end of 25, and especially 2026, you do not see a single negative growth rate in that 2026 column. We are expecting this improvement to continue across the board. But of course, it's very important for us to evaluate tariffs and how tariffs are going to impact different industries and relationships. One of the ways we do that is a chart like this. I know it looks like there's a lot going on. I promise it's an easy chart to read. What I'm showing you is the different industry or commodity down that left-hand column. Then you can see, I really want you to focus your attention to the color-coded columns on the right. Because what I'm showing you there is how much of that industry is sourced domestically here in the United States versus how much of that industry we rely on imports from the rest of the world. It always bothers me when someone says tariffs are all good or all bad. That's never the case. You have to take an industry by industry approach to understand who's going to be impacted by tariffs and who will feel less of an impact. Now, the industries that have a high percentage in that domestically sourced column, that shows we take care of most of those industries right here at home. It's the industries that have a higher percentage in that imported column that really worry me, right? Give you computer and electronics as a perfect example. We rely 85% on importing those things from the rest of the world. That's a big problem in terms of an impact on tariffs from, inflationary costs, more supply chain disruptions, right? So I just wanted to give you a little bit of flavor of which industries do we take care of here at home, which industries do we rely heavily on imports from, because that's going to be more of a tariff impact. Now, I also evaluate tariffs over time when I look at the relationship between tariffs and manufacturing. The dark blue line on the chart is the value of tariffs that the US government is collecting. So we're currently collecting $155.2 billion worth of revenue from tariffs. The first thing I want you to notice about this is we're not starting from zero. Tariffs have been around for quite some time, right? We still have tariffs in place from George Bush Sr. But you can see, really since the financial crisis, that dark blue line has been going up and up and up. The previous tariff record high was actually under President Biden. You can see that peak back in that 2022 time. But of course, as President Trump came into office, he put a lot more tariffs in place, and that's why we're sitting here at a new record high. Notice the light blue line on the chart. That's manufacturing. We are always pitched this idea from Democrats and Republicans that more tariffs means more manufacturing. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that for decades. Now, I'm not saying that won't happen in the future. The US does remain the #1 country for foreign direct investment. More countries are spending more money than they ever have before investing in the US. I just don't like giving politicians credit for anything. That's just me. I don't think any of our politicians are all that bright. It's just me personally. But you're going, there we go. Must be from Canada. But my point is that the US has a lot of competitive advantages. Is tariffs really what's going to drive business back to the US? Maybe. I just haven't seen it yet up until this point. But it's our supply chain, it's our access to energy, it's the capitalism that we still have here in the US, right? There are a number of reasons the US is going to remain the #1 destination. I do expect more manufacturing to come back. Again, I just don't like giving the politicians credit. Now, when I unpack the global economy, and by the way, at the end of every one of these sections, I have a checklist. That checklist are the 3 things that our president and CEO wants you to take away. These are the things they want you to evaluate in the business. First of all, again, I'm going to start at the bottom. The US is the #1 place for foreign direct investment. I want to talk about China here for just a second. Everybody always talks about how China is going to overtake the US. I can promise you none of us will ever live to see that. China is facing some of the most significant demographic decline in the world. They had a one-child policy, and they are just watching their population crumble. We are very optimistic on the path forward for North America. I know the relationship between the US and Canada is a little bit of an asterisk right now, but the US, Canada, Mexico, the EU, those are the places we're most excited about. But we do expect this nationalism to continue. Everybody always asks me, Taylor, when are tariffs going to get removed? Tariffs never get removed. Like I said, we still have tariffs in place from George Bush Sr. Could I see the percentage of tariffs coming down? Yes, but we all need to adjust to this new reality that nationalism is going to continue to be the path forward. Diversify yourself away from countries like China. We're very worried about the future of China. Focus your efforts here in North America and the US. There's no other place I'd rather be. Let's talk about inflation. One of the primary resulting factors of tariffs, as you all likely know, is inflation. Tariffs aren't the only reason we forecast inflation. There are a number of drivers that have us worried about a higher inflation environment into the future. Now again, this doesn't mean we won't grow. I've already showed you we're very optimistic on growth in the US and around the world as we move into the next few years. What I need you all to know about inflation is that means that the growth of the next few years is going to come at a higher cost. So yes, we'll grow, but we need to be laser focused on how to mitigate some of these costs because our margins depend on it. There are 4 primary reasons we're forecasting inflation to remain elevated as we move into the future. It's labor costs, it's fiscal policies, that's our government spending, electricity costs, and then nationalism, that's the tariff piece. I'm going to kick this section off by sharing 2 charts with you. The chart on the left is the CPI, that is the Consumer Price Index. That is the inflation benchmark that the Fed uses to set their interest rate policy. The chart on the right is producer prices. That's your cost of doing business. And so I want you to notice a few things here. First, you can see how crazy that inflation was in 21 and 22 following the pandemic, right? I don't want you to think that that's what we're forecasting into the future. That's absolutely not the case, thank goodness, right? However, we do expect inflation to start to become more problematic than it is as we sit here today. So if you look at the chart on the left, again, that's the chart the Fed looks at to set interest rate policy. Ideally, they like that metric to be at 2% to lower interest rates. It's at 2.7%, and the Fed's saying, close enough. And that's why we've seen lower interest rates in September. We do expect the Fed to cut interest rates twice more through the end of this year. We are expecting another interest rate cut in the October-November timeframe. We are expecting another interest rate cut in December. That's going to be very good news for the housing market moving forward. But my message is take advantage of those lower rates because that's temporary. As you look at 2026, you see that inflation benchmark going up to 4.1%, moving slightly higher. So the Fed might still be able to lower rates into early next year, but by the time we get into the middle of the year and the second half of next year, it's very unlikely the Fed keeps moving rates lower with that type of inflation. Now, of course, the big caveat is there's not many things I can forecast with 100% accuracy, but I can tell you that with 100% confidence, Chairman Powell is not going to have a job next year. Right? So that's the caveat that we're watching, because if President Trump puts someone in office that's going to think less about inflation and more about what President Trump is looking for from interest rates, it's something that we have to keep watching. But from our perspective, the lowest interest rates you're going to see are going to be the end of this year or early next year. So if you need to invest from a business standpoint, if you need to personally, you're thinking about buying a new home, if you need to lock in a long-term interest rate, we think that the end of this year or very early next year is going to be the best time to do some of those things. Now, let's move to the chart on the right, though, because that's really what's important to all of you. That is showing you your cost of doing business. And so what I'm showing you with those values of 2.6, 3.4, and 1.8%, your cost of doing business is going to continue to increase over the next 3 years. Again, yes, I'm saying there's growth coming in the next few years, but that's the higher cost that that growth is going to come at. There's two ways you offset that higher cost of doing business as far as I'm concerned. Price increases or productivity and efficiency gains. As far as we're concerned, if companies want to be successful during this period of higher costs, you have to be doing both. I'll leave the price conversation up to you all. I don't want to get involved with any lawyers today. But we need to think of ways to drive efficiency, because one of the biggest reasons these forecasts are increasing is because of the cost of labor. That is one of our primary concerns. It is material costs. It is the cost of labor. It is the impact from tariffs. Those are all driving those metrics higher. So as you think about planning for the next 3 years, think about what you can do today to automate, to invest, to drive your efficiency, to make your workforce more productive. It's going to be essential moving forward. Now, again, the first piece of this is material prices. I'm showing you softwood lumber, overall lumber prices and hardwood prices. You can see the growth rates over time. You all have been through some of the most extreme volatility over the course of the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, look at what the pricing trend was doing in 21 and 22, and then we really fell off a cliff. We saw prices lower in 22 and 23 than they were during the Great Recession during 08-09. Now, some of that pricing pressure is starting to build again. We expect this trend for lumber prices to look similar to what it did in 2018. That's the period I want you to reference. Think about the market in 2018, how your business responded to the market in 2018. That's most similar to what we expect the next 12 months to look like. But this is an inflationary pressure, and for some of you, this is welcoming news, right? That you are seeing some of those prices move higher. We've also, we take a look at a number of these metrics. I work with a lot of folks in this room. You can see plywood, hardwood, plywood. You can see some of that pricing pressure, again, building and moving positive. So we do expect higher prices to continue to come your way on the material side. The challenge is we're also adding those higher prices with higher labor costs. The bottom line here is showing you that the average salary in the United States is about $62,000. But I want you to notice the growth rates up top. Notice how in the last 5 years, the growth rates for our cost of labor are a lot higher than they were in the 20 years leading up to the pandemic. Folks, this is unfortunately a new reality. We are forecasting the cost of labor to increase 28% over the next 4.5 years. You're talking about 5 to 6% a year. Now, that's not new. If you've lived through the last 5 years, you've already been experiencing that. My comment here is we're just not going back to normal. For folks here in the US and in Canada, we have similar demographic trends. The reason that number is higher than what we're used to is because in the US and Canada, we didn't have enough kids. We've got this big baby boomer generation that's the biggest generation ever. And we've got the millennials and Gen Z, which are just a much smaller generation. I've got a 1-year-old, so I'm working on it, but the best thing the millennials could do is have 3 or more kids, because we didn't keep up with that. And so as a result, over the next 5 years, you've got the baby boomers leaving the workforce, and we don't have enough people coming up to replace them. That's why there's such a focus on AI and automation, because we have to find a way to meet all of this economic growth with just fewer people. And that's why we see this labor cost moving up significantly over the next few years. So we've got material costs rising, we've got labor costs rising, and then this is a really interesting chart, and I'm sure it'll resonate with a lot of you here. I'm showing you electricity costs. In 10 years of being an economist, I've never talked about electricity costs. But we are a lot now. Look at that dark blue line. That's the cost of electricity, and look what's happened since the pandemic. It's all those data centers we're building here. It's driving up our demand for electricity. I met with a manufacturer last week whose #1 input cost is now electricity. So my point is, yes, there's growth. There's growth coming. But all of these factors show that that growth is going to come at a higher cost. And that is what we need to be prepared for over the next few years. Those electric vehicles are going to get very expensive, so maybe think twice about buying one of those, or it better make you feel good about the earth or whatever you tell yourself. But just something to keep in mind. I might get in trouble for that one. The last thing I wanted to show you here is there are some factors out of our control. I'm showing you inflation in light blue and our government printing money in dark blue. Anytime our government issues treasuries or prints money, it drives inflation. So look back to 2020. You see that dark blue line shoot up. That's because the Treasury had to issue all of these treasuries to fund the COVID stimulus. Then 2 years later, you see that light blue line shoot up. And then the Fed said, I think we went a little too far here. We're going to pull this back. So they pulled back. You see that dark blue line come down. That's why we have lower inflation today. But look what they're back up to. We're issuing a record amount of treasuries again. That's going to drive higher inflation into the future. We're very nearsighted here in the US. And the reality is, in order to raise funding for our politicians' spending, you have to issue treasuries or print money. But there's repercussions to doing that. And we're going to feel some of those repercussions with higher inflation. So the question from all of this becomes, where are interest rates going? I'm showing you interest rates in the US and in Canada. Right now, the Canadians can borrow money at a lower rate. When we think about interest rates over the next 5 years, you're going to see a box appear on the screen. We do expect interest rates in the US and Canada to remain lower, again, over about the next 12 months. But as we get late into 26 and into 27, as we start to feel the impact of all these inflationary pressures I showed you, we expect interest rates to steadily rise. By the end of 2029, we would expect interest rates in the US and in Canada to be between 7 and 8%. Now, for the millennials in the room, that sounds awful, right? I felt the same way. I bought a house in 2020 on our president and CEO's advice, and I went to our CEO and I said, they offered me a 3.1% mortgage rate. And he said, great job, buddy. And I said, I think I'm going to wait. I think I can do better. And he said, you're an idiot. And he said, lock in this and move on with your life. And thank goodness I did. But it goes to show, right, the millennials aren't used to this. And when I hear interest rates from 27, 28, 29 building up to 7 or 8%, I ask our CEO, I say, how are we going to grow? And he said, you need a history lesson, my friend. He said, I lived through the 70s and 80s when interest rates were far higher. We all bought homes. The key factor is, are we going to make more money while interest rates are going up? And I just showed you labor costs are increasing 28%. So while that's challenging for businesses, it means we're going to make a lot more money into the future. That's why we're still optimistic on the path forward, despite some higher rates. But again, if you can lock in interest rates in the next 6, 9, 12 months, we think that'll be a great thing for you all. And that's really the takeaway here is interest rates are going to be the lowest over the next 12 months. Take advantage of that. Make sure you have a strategy to deal with this higher cost environment. Your sales and revenue are going to grow over the next 3 years, I can tell you that. But will your margin expand? That's going to come down to, can we handle some of these increasing costs? All right, a couple of comments here around labor. First of all, there's a lot of talk about the labor market. Nobody can trust any of the data. I get it. But when we look at the data, we triangulate the BLS data with a number of different sources. And what we see today is that the labor market's pretty balanced. I'm showing you the number of unemployed people per job opening. So for every one job opening, we have 1.009 people unemployed. Folks, now is a great time to hire. If you're preparing for the growth that's coming your way, there's a little bit of slack in the labor market. Take advantage of that, because as we move into 26, that number is going to drop, which means there are going to be fewer and fewer people available for you to hire as we move deeper into the next few years. One of the primary reasons for that, so I'll back up here, is the demographic shift. I'm showing you the participation rates of the different generations. So the top 3 lines here, that's what we call our prime age labor force. That's capturing the folks from 25 to 54. For those of you over 54, I think you're still prime. That's just how they identify it. But it shows that that 25 to 54 age group is participating in the workforce as previous generations have. The problem is the 2 lines down below, the orange and the dark blue line. The orange line is capturing the tail end of the baby boomer generation. The dark blue line is capturing Gen Z. We can't figure out how to get the young people to join the workforce. Now, as a millennial, this is nice because we have a new generation to pick on after 10 years of us getting picked on here. But the challenge is, if we can't get Gen Z to join the workforce as the baby boomers leave the workforce because of the size of their generation, that's going to be a big challenge, a big problem. So we need to find ways to show Gen Z that they can transfer their skills to our businesses. Otherwise, those labor costs are going to be a very big challenge. Now, I also wanted to show you where the population growth is happening in this country. This is very important as you think about expansion opportunities, as you think about the health of the housing and construction markets. I'm showing you growth between 2020 and 2024. So I'm really just showing you which states won the post-pandemic years. You can see, look at Texas, look at the Southeast, look at anywhere out west not named California, right? You can see where the majority of this population growth is happening. And so while it's always fun to see where people are moving, again, these have real implications. If you're thinking about expanding your business or expanding your operation, go where the people are going. It's one of the most important underlying variables in our economic outlook. Where's the population growth happening? Now, I do need you to keep in mind these are percentage growth rates, right? Because everybody always says, Taylor, what's happening in Idaho? Listen, it probably only takes a few thousand people to achieve a growth rate like that in Idaho, right? So you have to keep in mind we're talking about the number of people from their population. But again, look at where the people are going. That's where a lot of the opportunities are. There's only 6 states, I should say 7 if we include Hawaii here, that are actually seeing population decline. The survey results said Hawaii, the problem was just too expensive. When you had Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia, the #1 reason was lack of job opportunity. And then New York, Illinois, and California was politics and taxes, and I'll leave that one alone. But again, go where the people are going. So what I want you to take away from the labor market is there's clearly a cultural shift that's happening. It's too late for us all to have kids. We already have the baby boomers leaving the workforce, so we need to be prepared for this tighter labor market. Again, it's my biggest concern about your ability to meet the growth of the next few years is, do we have the people to take that on? All right, we've got 2 sections left for you. We're going to talk about the U.S. economy, and then we're going to dive into the construction markets, and I'll take any questions that you have. The first thing I wanted to talk about here is uncertainty. This is the uncertainty index for the United States. I want you to notice that back in March and April, we were more uncertain than we were at the height of the pandemic. Put that in perspective, right? The tariff policy created more uncertainty than the worst of the pandemic. That's why we saw a lot of the business investment, a lot of the CapEx investment come to a grinding halt in the first quarter of this year. Now, the good news is that that dark blue line is starting to come down. Now, we're still more uncertain than what I'd call normal times, but at least we're not sitting up there at that record level of uncertainty. I met with another business owner a couple weeks ago, and he said, Taylor, I don't know if we're actually more confident in the path forward. I think we're just all realizing we have to run a business despite what's going on in Washington. So I thought that was maybe a great way to put it. But it's encouraging to see that uncertainty at least is starting to subside. If uncertainty wasn't starting to subside by this time, we'd likely be downgrading a lot of our forecasts. Now, there are a number of reasons we're not forecasting a recession for the U.S. We are still forecasting growth. The first is that our banks are still lending. Our banks are lending $18.5 trillion over the last month. That's a record high. If the banks were concerned about a recession, they would not be lending like this. Now, this is good news in the near term. I worry about this a little bit further down the road. But this is good news in the near term. So uncertainty's coming in. The banks are lending money. Our financial conditions here in the U.S. are loosening, which is good news. At any time this metric here on the chart is negative, it means financial conditions are loosening. Anytime this chart is positive, above zero, that's when we have problems because we're tightening up financial conditions like we did in 08-09, like we did for a short time in the pandemic. So those are three positives: uncertainty coming in, banks lending, financial conditions loosening, and then finally, on a week-to-week basis, the U.S. economy is growing at a pretty healthy 2 to 3%. So whenever somebody says, how come you're not forecasting a recession like they're talking about in the media, I share these four charts to say, from a fundamental standpoint, how could we be forecasting a recession with that type of growth? Now, I'll spend all of 30 seconds here on this next slide. This is our GDP forecast. The dark blue line is U.S. GDP over time. You can see those markers towards the end. Folks, it doesn't get much better than this. With each new quarter of data over the course of the next 3 years, we have GDP moving to a new record high. Doesn't get much better than that. Now, you do see a little bit of a slowdown out there in 2027. That's not a recession, it's just a slower pace of growth. But in order to really understand the health of GDP and the health of the housing market, for that matter, you need to understand the health of the consumer. And the reality is, our consumers are spending more money than they ever have before. 2/3 of the U.S. economy is consumer spending. If you look at the bottom line here on the chart, it's showing you that over the last 12 months, our consumers have spent $8.594 trillion. That is a record high. If you look at the top two lines, it's showing you that the quarter-over-quarter or year-over-year growth rate is between 3.7% and 4%, so our consumers are spending and spending above the rate of inflation. Folks, we have pretty healthy consumers in this country, and that's why we can be optimistic on the housing market and GDP moving forward. Now, the one challenge that we've dealt with is the fact that consumer expectations have been negative. So the light blue line's consumer spending, and it shows that we're still spending, but the dark blue line shows you that despite the fact that we're still spending, consumers are grumpy. We've got some grumpy consumers in this country. And that's why the housing market has gone through some pain over the last year. Because when consumer expectations are down, we still, go to the store and buy new clothes. We still go to restaurants and pay for food, but we hold off on those big housing, automobile purchases when consumer expectations are down. The good news is that momentum is starting to build. The even better news is that we are making more money than we ever have before, and this is also true in Canada as well. Both personal income in the U.S. and in Canada is at a record high. So when we look at the housing market and folks say, why are you optimistic? Well, it's because we're making more money. I'm showing you two lines on the chart. The top line is personal income that includes transfer receipts. The bottom line excludes them. The reason I show you these two metrics is because the media loves to say income is down compared to the pandemic. Well, if you look at that top teal line, that rooster tail you see in that 2020 timeframe, that was the stimulus checks. What a misleading thing for the media to say. Consumers' income's down compared to the pandemic. Of course, income's down compared to free money time, right? But if you look at that bottom blue line, that's showing you if we remove the stimulus checks, we've continued to see incomes grow. So we've got our incomes growing. We're spending more money than we ever have before. And then on top of that, we're handling our debt just fine, folks. If you look at our household debt as a percentage of earnings, that's there in dark blue. If you look at credit card debt as a percentage of earning, that's there in teal. Both of these metrics are below the pre-pandemic level, and they're nowhere close to 2008, 2009. Yes, do we have to watch them? Of course we do. But we're still in a good place from handling our debt. So we see the consumer economy continuing to do well. The other thing is, I mentioned this earlier, but really to zero in, our manufacturing economy is finally out of a recession. The dark blue line is industrial output. The light blue line is really isolating the manufacturing segment. Both of these lines were negative during 2024. So far in 2025, they have since turned positive. And if you look at that forecast, yes, there'll be times where we accelerate, there'll be times where we slow, but we're showing you 12 consecutive quarters of growth. That forecast stays above zero all throughout that time. This is exciting. We've got a healthy consumer economy. We've got a manufacturing economy that's finally out of its downturn. And then on top of that, we've got an increase in exports in teal, and we've got an increase in capital investment there in dark blue. So I'm not expecting you all to feel as positive as I am, because these trends are just forming now. But it's very clear to us that we have a robust path forward. We are also starting to see some of that positives when we look at the industry. This is showing you production out of the sawmills. The bottom line is showing you the size of the industry. And it shows that, yes, the industry today is still smaller than it was back before the pandemic. But I want you to notice the growth rates up top. After about 2 years of that green line up top being negative, we have just since turned positive. The sawmills are picking up their level of production. Look at that quarter-over-quarter growth rate. That's up 3.3%. That's the highest growth rate we've seen in 2 years. So again, I'm not expecting you to feel as positive as I am. These trends are just forming. But it's clear that the momentum for sawmills are building just like it's building in the broader manufacturing economy. If you look at wood products production, it's the same message. Look at those growth rates up top. After a couple years of the worst downturn that the wood production market had seen since 08-09, we are finally seeing those growth rates turn positive. So you are seeing that momentum build. Now, that's not to say everything's positive. If you look at pallet production, that is the one area that I'm still a little bit concerned with, as those growth rates remain negative, minus 4.4%. But you'll also see that if you look at the bottom line, that industry is bigger than it ever was before, right? So there is some positives out there. I always have to give a shout out to any of you that feed into the paper market too. We are seeing the paper growth rates finally start to lift up above zero. So when we look at the manufacturing data, when we look at the subsets of manufacturing that mean something to all of you in the room, we see generally good news in this momentum building. All right, let's finish off with the construction markets, then I'll take any questions that you have. I have another one of these charts here for you. It's a dashboard. I'm showing you a number of the different construction markets, where those growth rates are as we sit here today, and expectations for the end of the year 26 and 27. Generally speaking, we're very bullish on single family. We're still a little bit pessimistic on what we see coming out of the commercial space. That's not a surprise because commercial lags behind the economy. So some of the weakness that the manufacturing markets went through in 2024, commercial is going to feel through 25. But notice again, as we get into 26, 27, this chart really builds momentum. You can see an extension of this here on the next slide. Notice single-family housing there. Currently, we're down 2.2%. We expect to be down 5.3% by the end of 25, but as we get into 26 and 27, you can see that type of growth picking back up. The reason we're optimistic this growth in single-family housing comes back is because despite the affordability challenges, we are seeing them improve. Now, this is a fascinating chart. This is one of my favorites. This is showing you the affordability challenge of affording a home by state. What this is sharing is how much the average person is short of affording an average price home in their state. So another way to say this is, if you live in California, you need to take on an additional $123,000 of debt on top of your mortgage to afford an average home, right? You can see why a lot of the population growth is happening in the Southeast, is happening in the Midwest, is happening in Texas, because they're a lot closer to that break-even affordability challenge, right? So, listen, I'm not saying places like Utah, Nevada, Oregon, Washington won't grow. They're just going to grow from everyone running out of California still, as we've already seen, right? But again, it gives you a little bit of an idea of where the housing market is most affordable and what's going to drive some of that population growth. Now again, if you look at the mortgage rates, the 30-year is there in light blue, the 15 years there in dark blue. We have seen a little bit of relief in these markets, and we would expect further relief as we move, again, later into this year and into early 26. Now, again, I wouldn't expect to see mortgage rates go any lower than they did in that 2004 timeframe, right? We would believe that's where mortgage rates will likely level off. Does that 30-year get closer to 6 even? We would expect that to be the case. Do we see the 30-year dropping below 6? Not likely. And then we would expect mortgage rates to rise in 27, 28, and 29. So again, take advantage of this, especially for those of you that are looking for homes. But the key takeaway here is mortgage rates have come down a bit, so it's giving us a little bit of an affordability break. The other thing that's come in here a bit is housing prices. Housing prices at the peak in the U.S. averaged about $440,000. We're down to about $410,000 today. So you get slightly lower mortgage rates, you're getting housing prices coming down, and that's what's helping some of these new buyers really get into the market. Now again, for those of you that own a home, trust me, we will have a great 3 or 4 years of equity building from 2026 to 2030. So I'm not saying this decline is going to continue, but this temporary relief that we're getting here today is at least spurring some of that additional activity for the housing market. The reason the housing market, of course, is so important to you all is look at the correlation between wood product shipments and the housing market, right? Wood product shipments are there in light blue. The housing market is there in dark blue. You can see how spot on that correlation is, right? So as that single family line takes off in 26 in the positive direction, that means more demand for you all. And that's why we're optimistic in 26 and 27. This wood product shipments indicator, I've worked with a number of companies in this room. It's one of the best correlated leading indicators to the businesses that I've worked with here. So there's some positives coming. Now, again, note where the growth in the housing market's coming from. This is showing you the growth rates by state. And this is where the growth rates are today. This isn't a forecast, this is where the growth rates are today. But again, you can see in some of those lower cost areas that are driving a lot of the positive growth. We always want to be geographically specific. But again, as we move into 2026, we expect most of this map to return to the positives again. So we're very optimistic on single family in 26 and 27. We've got a little bit more weakness to come later this year before that rebounds ultimately upon us. Commercial, we're a little bit more concerned with. So for those of you on the commercial side of the industry, we track these architecture billings numbers. Anytime these numbers are below 50, it means architects are seeing a decline in their billings. Anytime they're above 50, they're seeing growth. That's a great leading indicator for commercial construction. And unfortunately, the reality is a lot of these numbers are below 50. So while we're optimistic on single-family housing, on multifamily housing, we still have a little bit more pessimism as it relates to the commercial construction markets, with the architects seeing their pipelines continuing to shrink. And you can see that here on the next slide. The dark blue line's commercial construction. It's the overall industry all jam-packed together. You'll notice that that dark blue line just turned negative. We have just entered a recession for commercial construction. We would expect that downturn to continue into the middle of 26 before commercial construction recovers late in 26, and that growth carries us into 27. So it's just a timing difference, right? Single family goes positive early in 26, Commercial, it just takes us a little bit longer to get there. One of the leading indicators that tells us commercial construction is going to be weak, that's that light blue line. It's showing you that occupancy rates for commercial buildings are down. Another indicator we look at for commercial construction, again, commercial construction there in dark blue, is backlogs of commercial contractors. That's what's there in green. And that green line says, yes, we're going to see some decline, but this decline will be temporary. And that's encouraging, right? That leading indicator is saying by the time we get later into 26, we're going to pop right back up. But one thing I do want to be clear about, the situation in commercial construction would look a lot worse if it wasn't for all this growth in that data center market. So I don't want to sugarcoat commercial construction because it is going to be a challenge over the next 12 months. And you can see that challenge is already characterizing most of the country when you look at commercial construction. It's a little bit more pessimistic. So again, I'm not saying this is the bottom falling out of commercial construction. I'm just saying we've got a bit more weakness in a lot of the commercial space compared to what we see in the residential space. We're going to have to be very geographic specific, very market specific when you look for opportunities for growth in commercial construction. So wanted to, again, just highlight, listen, we're very optimistic on the U.S. economy. There's pockets of strengths, pockets of weaknesses, but we do expect this momentum to continue to build moving forward. Again, a lot of the second half of 25 is that recovery phase. It just means our growth rates are getting less negative. So that's the good news for 2025, is at least less negative. It's really 26 and 27 when we're expecting a lot of this positive growth. Folks, I talk about this stuff all the time. There's a QR code there. That'll bring you over to our website. I do free podcasts. We have free blogs, free resources for you all. So take out your phones and scan that QR code. It'll get you connected with all of us there at ITR. There's a couple of mics in the middle of the room. I've got about 5 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to just step up to the mics and fire your question away. I'll also be hanging out for a little bit after for any personal questions, but I've got a few minutes here if anyone wants to step up to the mic and ask any questions. Don't all jump at once. You also will all have access to my slide deck, so I appreciate all the pictures that were taken throughout. And again, I'll be happy to hang around here after for any questions you have. Your industry, listen, I know a lot of millennials can take your industry for granted. I don't. I appreciate everything you all do for North America, for our country. Your industry is what makes our country great. So thank you all so much for having me here, and I wish you the best of luck in 2026. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Taylor, for your very insightful and thought-provoking keynote. I know there was a lot more positives in your report than I expected, so I think we'll invite you back in a couple of years and see how smart you really were. But let's give him another round of applause. Thanks, Taylor. Please take a moment to look at the screen for important reminders about today's schedule. Push the green button. Did it work? There we go. We are looking forward to tonight's exciting Western Night networking event sponsored by NWH. There will be leather stamping, food, drinks, and more right here. With that, I encourage all of us to join us for the next opening of the exhibit showcase. Thank you.